Let's talk about the new patch. It's time. So there's still things we need to talk about. First, the full patch preview, right? That Freak posted. With actual numbers. With actual numbers from Freak. 14.16 full preview. This patch is simultaneously solo queue and pro play focused. Lots of changes to make solo queue fairer, with things like top laners getting penalized for solo killing. Overall ADC power level. No client. Power level with more item nerfs and buffs to champions who can use the love. Many of the buffs, Azir, Riyana, Syndra, Sylas, Viscount, and Wukong, are strictly weak for solo queue. If they show up in pro and create diversity, then that's great, but not trying to buff things that aren't actually weak after accounting for champion mastery. Okay, that's a lie, you're buffing Kiyana. What? Kiyana adjustments are to give her a bit more control over her early game and notch up her jungle secondary role. We think her being a scaling assassin is unique and worth preserving, but we think we can make an early lane a bit more forgiving to play and smooth it out a little. Senna adjustments are to make it harder to be the primary carry unless you get ADC levels of gold income. As a support, she should be more supportive, meaning she'll be stronger alongside an ADC in lane and a bit weaker alongside tanks. Solo queue versus pro power, essentially. Okay, that's true, because in pro play, they do play a lot of Ornn Senna, right? And that's okay. Also, if Senna occasionally considers AP items, that's cool. We don't want them to overshadow AD builds, just be worth considering. Black Cleaver rules change, bring it back into viability for Senna, especially alongside ADCs, and is a buff for many on-hit fighters. Lucian and Corki changes are specifically for pro and elite level solo queue, where they're dominating pick rates, making targeted adjustments that we believe are mid-skewed. This is cope. Katarina, we're closing the gap on QE max and making raw AP builds stronger by buffing ratios. I realize Wukong has a typo. The changes are passive armor +1 at level, stacks up +6 armor, E attack speed up 5% at all ranks. So this seems very small buffs for Wukong. Skarner changes are to introduce Juggernaut builds for players who want them and shore up his early game now that Q3 is much weaker. You may notice we removed the AP items and the Doran Shield buff. We elected to instead further nerf the resilience of Doran's Blade so that it's easier to make inroads against those who start with it. For AP junglers, we'd still rather adjust the champions themselves. Okay. So to go over the patches, did rather do a good job. So number one, we have Azir with health regen being up a little bit and armor being up a little bit. So okay, no surprise there, they're reverting the health regen nerf they did a long time ago. Because honestly, that nerf was kinda stupid. As pro players will not care about health regen that much, and that's why Azir was still a very pro-dominant pick, while he lost a shit ton of win rate in solo queue for like silver players. So what in reality Riot should have done back then is they should have nerfed in some other way that would have nerfed pro play Azir more than a fucking health regen, which is a stat that pros will not care as much as games in silver. So yeah, no surprise that they're reverting there, also giving him armor. I guess armor kind of helps with ADC meta, right? That's kind of it. Like lately, like last 3 patches, they're giving a lot of champions armor, especially like level 1 armor, which is like more impactful in early game. I guess it's because ADC. So okay, Azir buff definitely makes sense. I don't think it's a very big buff. They're going for durability over damage. So if you're playing against Azir, I don't think you're really gonna care much about this. The only sad part here is that like, I guess if you're playing Zat and enemy's playing tank Azir, like I played yesterday, you're even more sad because now he's gonna be even tankier. Then we have Rihanna. So Rihanna, yesterday I said, well, I hope they're going for like some Q AP ratio buff. I hope they're going for some like damage buff that's not around ultimate. Thank you, Riot. You guys kinda delivered. Even though this buff is very small, and Rihanna will most likely, for sure, still max 3 points W or 5 points W into Q, which makes more sense right now. I think this is a really good buff, and I think this is exactly what champ needs. So good job on this one. Then we have Syndra, guys. R damage per Dark Sphere goes up by 10 at every single rank of R, and you know this is damage per sphere. Syndra ult is always 3 spheres, so this is basically 30 damage on ultimate at every time, right? But then late game you can get like 5 or 6 spheres off pretty easily on ultimate, and that's when the buff is even bigger. Does this buff make sense on Syndra? I personally don't think so, even though damage on spheres is a bit skill expressive, as better players do have more spheres on ultimates usually. The problem I have with this type of buff is that Syndra ultimate is the most unskilled spell in on Syndra. Like, it's just... It just is the most unskilled spell. And honestly, at least for myself, I think Syndra Ultimate already does enough damage right now. Especially with Execute in late game. So, like, if it was up to me buffing this champion and I would like to buff the damage, I would much rather buff Q AP ratio back to how it used to be. Because, well, Q is at least, like, dodgeable by opponents, right? And stuff. So again, I don't know. I don't really approve this buff. I don't really think she needs it. Whatever. You want to buff my champion. I'm not going to complain. So I don't really approve of this Syndra changes. So if you're going Azir, I kind of approve. Orianna, I definitely approve. Syndra, I don't approve. Then we have Sylas. Starting HP up by 25. So, okay. Yeah, small HP buff, fine. Passive damage on primary target up by 5%. And then W base damage up by 10. So... this definitely, I don't think is gonna make Sylas as strong as he used to be, right? Because he got like nerf last patch. I don't think these buffs are strong enough. Like, I could be wrong, but I don't think they're strong enough to like bring him to even power level as before. He's probably still gonna be weaker than he was before. I like the passive damage, like AP ratio buff. I think I do like that one, but the one that I really don't like is the W base damage, because why are we incentivizing W max Sylas? Like, this is the most brain dead version of Sylas. Please no, like, they should have went for Q buff or E buff. I really don't get why W damage is being buffed, even though, to be fair to them, 75 to 215 is still not very high for an ability. However, the reality is that this is a point and click ability and it also heals you, right? So not the whole strength of the ability is not only in damage. I would still say that I do not approve of this buff simply because of the W buff. I hate it a little bit. Katarina. So then we have Katarina. So this one is really interesting because a lot of people were saying that they think are nerfs to Katarina. So we have Q damage going from 80 to 200 to 80 to 240. So that's a big damage buff to Q, right? AP ratio is also up by 10%. E base damage in return is gonna go down by 20, and I believe this only matters. I guess if you're doing Q max first, this nerf is really gonna matter only at like level 12, 13, 10. So honestly, it still takes a long time to really feel this nerf, I think, on Katarina. And then our on hit effectiveness will go down by 5%. So a lot of people were saying that they think these are nerfs because E damage is so much weaker, but I don't personally really see it. Like, what? Like, I get that, like, in mid-game, you might be getting multiple E's off onto opponents, and by then you could, like, maybe classify this as a nerf, but, like, 40 damage up on such an ability is, like, such an insane buff, plus 10% AP ratio. And obviously, like, Katarina will now want to max Q first, right? The Riot wants Katarina to max Q first, instead of what Katarina players are currently doing, which is 3 points Q into E. And I think this, like, actually makes sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense that Katarina's main ability, or like people that like Q shouldn't be the ability you should be maxing out first. Like, the reason why obviously people are not maxing out Q first is because this ability is trash, because it does 200 damage, which is just trash. The reason why the ability does trash damage is because it's a point and click, zero skill ability, right? It's kind of like why Sylas W will not do insane amounts of damage, and 215 or 205 in this case is also pretty low for an ability at max rank. And it makes sense. However, I'm really afraid of this Katarina buff because I think 240 is really strong, and I think the way people are now gonna lose against Katarina is she's probably just gonna buy D-Shield and just spam Q till you die. So she's gonna become more like a poke champion in lane. And that's kind of where I'm like, I think maybe they went a little bit too much here in the Q damage, because I'm really afraid of that happening. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this Q buff was a little bit too big. But then again, on the setup, like, yeah, the E nerf sucks. I guess she kind of needs a compensation nerf, I guess, somewhere. So I kind of see maybe like high-elo Katarina's being a little bit upset about this. But to be honest, for 99% of Katarina players who are not Master Elo, I definitely think these are like good changes for them. And so I guess for the majority of player base, I think these are good changes. And then like our on-hit effectiveness, like, let's be honest, AP Katarina should be probably the more, like, AP Katarina is the more healthier version of Katarina and should probably be the more common one. So like, I don't really care if like on-hit Katarina gets worse, because honestly, I'm in big favor of AP Katarina being better. So overall, I personally approve of these changes, even though, yeah, I'm afraid of Q being maybe a little bit too high. Vi, Q max damage up by 10. I don't think it's gonna do much. Nothing really here to say. Skarner, health up by 20, base AD up by 3, and Q bonus AD ratio up by 0.2. So this kind of helps, like also Skarner, that sometimes Skarner has like these Titanic Hydra builds that I know people did at the beginning. But overall, I would say like these are a little bit bigger buffs than they did last patch. I still think they're going kinda small on Skarner, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets another buff in the future. Like, I don't know, like, they're giving him a lot of flat health. Like, it shouldn't really be buffing, like, W, maybe. Although, I kind of get, like, W is hard to buff on Skarner because it makes his top lane play pattern very unskilled. Maybe, I don't really know what the, like, where to buff Skarner, really. Like, what is the play on buffing this champion? You can't really, like, it's hard to buff W, even though it's the most trash ability. I mean, yeah, not much to say, I guess. The base AD is probably going to help top lane a little bit more than jungle. Overall, I mean, we're still not going to see Skarner, you know, we're still not going to see Skarner. I think it's still probably a little bit too weak here. Wukong, so these changes were fake. So again, if you read Freak, what he said down here. So again, Wukong got 5% attack speed per rank on E. And he got 1 armor at all levels on passive. So basically, if you stack the full passive, 6 bonus armor. So honestly, I would say also on the small sides of Wukong buffs, it makes him like better against comps that you want to pick Wukong against anyway, which are like physical damage comps because of passive. That's pretty much it. I would say Skarner Wukong vibe buffs seem to be kind of on the small side. Yeah, no, yeah, like they're all fine, I guess. You know, I can't complain too much. And then, okay, so Corki. This is a big one, right? I was asking for Corki nerfs. I was shocked yesterday they're actually nerfing Corki. Are the nerfs good? Yes, they are. Thank you, Freak. I don't know if Freak watched my video, he probably didn't, but either they should have nerfed damage on Q, cooldown on Q, or fucking missile speed on Q. Q is way too OP. So thank you, Freak, because mana cost being up actually does matter, because right now he has way too much room to spend Q with tier buy, and then Q cooldown being up by 1 second will also matter. Even though Corki, I would assume, is still gonna be okay to play in Hyla, this is like a step in the right direction to like maybe some champions being able to actually beat him in lane, right? Especially if Corki misplays. So yeah, this 1 second on Q is gonna be noticeable. So then champion adjustments, Lucian 10 damage off Q, as the compensation gets 0.5 AD ratio on passive. So again, trying to make him worse solo lane, better bot lane. Not really surprising. I mean, 205 damage for an ability you max first is pretty bad. It is pretty bad. So, yeah, not much to say, I guess. Lucian solo lane will die, slowly. He will die. So, okay, this is one of the biggest changes of the patch, which is Kiyana. So they're trying to make, this is like a lot for Kiyana. So first of all, armor up in lane. So they're trying to make her better in lane, right? Kind of like what they did with Zat in the last few patches. Armor up again because it's ADC meta. They want to also make Kiyana better against ADC champs. Kiyana, honestly, naturally speaking, should be already countering ADC champs because Grassmark is OP against every ADC champion. Almost every ADC champion. Then we have, so here's the big one. So Q damage is going to go up by 10, down at rank 5. However, the AD ratio on Q is up by 15%, which means that even at level 9, realistically speaking, your Q is still going to be doing more damage. So your Q is doing more damage at every single rank, right? Especially in late game. Like this is going to be very noticeable amount of damage. But W damage is going down. And because W damage is going down, it's probably going to mean you're going to start to want to max E second on Kiyana now. So this nerf is not going to be noticeable till level 14. But by then, your Q is going to also do a lot more damage, right? But the reason why this matters is because if you're maxing W second, then your Q is also doing less damage because W applies on your Q. Then the R AD ratio is going down by 0.5. So that's a big, massive hit to Kiyana R. Kiyana R is no longer going to be a nuke. So now it's going to be much easier to tank Kiyana R. So it is very hard to say whether these are buffs or nerfs. These are probably nerfs in situations where Kiyana just all of a sudden all-ins you and does one combo, like 2 Qs, like basically one combo, and then kills you with R. Because she's probably going to do a little bit less damage because the Q is doing a lot less damage. Simultaneously speaking though, if the fight goes very long and she gets multiple Qs off, she's probably doing more damage than before. Also, her early game is stronger, which is also a big part of the champion. So I would imagine that in hands of a good player, this might be a buff. As long as you can play, as long as the Kiyana can play a fight kind of extended and long. But these are really interesting changes, honestly, because Riot has never done this big of a change to a champion, I feel like, in recent times. Senna already went over them. So Black Cleaver, at first I thought it's a joke and it doesn't do anything, but then I thought about it more, and this is a pretty big Black Cleaver buff on certain champions. Like, for example, Urgot is gonna proc stack Black Cleaver now insanely fast onto you. Like, this is gonna be a massive Urgot buff. Riven will do Q auto Q and stack Black Cleaver to full stacks. Senna, auto attack, and Q are gonna do 2 stacks now. So Senna will do auto Q auto, whole Black Cleaver is procced on you. Viego will do Q auto, that's 2 I think Black Cleaver, or is it even more maybe, I don't know. If you buy Bork on your champion, I believe you're getting 2 stacks per every auto attack. So this Cleaver buff, as far as I understand, will do a lot. Will do a lot to certain champions. I believe this also helps with Titanic Hydra. I think if you have Titanic Hydra in your build, your Cleaver will stack even faster. That's also a thing. So this will do a lot to certain champions. Like Urgot will for sure gain some win rate of this. Riven is gonna be kind of happy because she's struggling. Even though Cleaver is not that good item on her, it's gonna be much better item now. Okay, and then we have lastly, Dorn's Blade. Big nerf. 20 less health, 0.5% lifesteal. I mean, they're going pretty big on Dorn's Blade nerf. I am not sure anymore if this is going to be the best Dorn item in the game. I didn't expect them to go this hard. This is a big nerf. Item will still be good. However, obviously, like if you're Yon and Yasuo, you're probably gonna want to start Dorn Shield much more. Anyway, to continue on, okay, so Dorn's Blade nerf, very big. Certain champs are going to be sad, especially ADCs, right? Yon and Yasuo will not be as sad here, I think, because they can swap to D-Shield in most matchups. It does suck that Yon, Yasuo, and Tryndamere are paying for the sins of ADCs again. Okay, Blade of the Ruin King, 5 AD down, 5 attack speed down, melee on hit damage 1 up. So melee champs for the most part are going to be fine with this item still. On ADCs, this item will be worse. So like Twitch is gonna be like less happy and whoever else buys Blade of the Ruin King. Now here's the thing. I think this Blade of the Ruin King nerf is going to hurt Yasuo and Yon in a way that people are not thinking. I could be wrong, but with the latest Greaves nerfs and with now Dorn's Blade of the Ruin King losing 5% attack speed, what I think is gonna happen is that when you complete Blade of the Ruin King and Berserkers on Yon and Yasuo, your Q is not gonna be a 1.3 unless you're super high level. And I think that's gonna kinda fuck with Yasuo and Yon a little bit. However, I think this item will still be the rush item on them, right? Like it's not gonna change. Like this is still a rush item on Aurelia. It's probably a nerf overall, but not a big nerf. And then we have Daft Timers and we have Daft Home Guards. So like Daft Home Guards is something new, okay? So the timer will now start immediately when leaving the fountain, which means that if you're waiting 5 gold in base, right? And after you spawn, you die, you wait 5 gold in base, you're no longer wasting this duration. So that's going to be big, especially on people that don't have TP up or people that don't run TP. And then the duration of Daft Home Guards is also going to 8 seconds, which means that if you play Ignite laner and you die, you're going to have 8 seconds of running straight back to lane, which means you're going to be losing a lot less. So again, the reason why this is being buffed is strictly to nerf TP users. And the Daft Timer being also up is also nerf to TP users, okay? So this is how they're trying to nerf TP. That's my patch preview.